Please read the roll.
Thank you.
May 2nd, 2022, come to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner DeBella?
Here.
Commissioner Adel?
Here.
Commissioner Avedisian?
Here.
Commissioner Buell? Commissioner Bush?
Here.
Commissioner Curry? Commissioner Drake?
Here.
Commissioner Gardeau?
Here.
Commissioner Healy?
Here.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Here.
Commissioner Hoheb? Commissioner Holloway? Commissioner Iona?
Here.
Commissioner LaChance? Commissioner Lester? Commissioner Lewis? Commissioner Magnan? She had to step out. She's here. Commissioner Maniscalco? Commissioner Mandyke?
Here.
Commissioner Murata? Commissioner Payne?
Here.
Commissioner Patel?
Here.
Commissioner Petoskey? Commissioner Salemi?
Here.
Commissioner Sweezy?
Here.
Commissioner Taylor?
Here.
Commissioner Torres?
Here.
Commissioner Vicino? Commissioner Wolf? Vicino here. Commissioner Wolf? There is a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Stand for pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On the agenda, item number 9.
Your mic on, Bill.
I say we're going to move to take it off. Is that what it is?
Yeah, number 9's off, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that first. We'll remove it from the agenda. Is there a motion to
So moved.
remove? Okay, it's removed and seconded. Obviously, it's not ready for consideration by the board, so we're going to remove it, go back to the attorney's, chief of legal counsel's office. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Okay. Approval of minutes of April 4th, 2022. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded.
Second.
Are there any additions or deletions? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
One abstention, Mr. Chairman.
One abstention? Maureen?
Yep.
Item number 5, public comments relative to agenda items. Public comments relative to agenda items. Okay, item 6, report from the district chairman. I'm going to ask to pass it, and I'll come back after the two executive and the council report. Without objection. Item 7, report from the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a number of issues that really we've already communicated directly to the commissioners and the towns, but I'm just going to kind of go through them. And if there's any questions that commissioners might have, we can talk through them. I sent an email Friday, I believe. Good news, we've been waiting for the integrated plan to be approved. As you know, we submitted a bunch of comments from their review of our submission. We are hoping, they have told us that hopefully late this week, we will have something back that we can review, and hopefully they've integrated the items that are important to us. Most importantly is the language such that bond counsel and our district counsel, Chris, will be able to utilize the legislative authorization that we already have to do projects under $23 million. So as we have done in the past, in the first two referendums, we did referendums the old-fashioned way. We usually did them in November, and we were very successful. We received more than 75% approval on the referendums for two $800 million referendums. We will not be spent, as the integrated plan, the whole idea of the integrated plan is to spend, right now we're spending about $120 million a year on average on the clean water project alone, and then another $100 million on the CIP. Our proposal on the integrated plan is to do completely the opposite, spend less over a longer period of time. So the integrated plan, instead of spending $120 million, we're going to spend anywhere between $40 and $60 million over the next 50 years. So the goal is that we have projects, nothing's been designed to date because we don't have the authority to spend any more money than the $1.8 billion that's been authorized. So if we get the language and if bond council approves of it, we will be able to use immediately not only the authority for the integrated plan, but more importantly, how do we pay for it will be through the Clean Water Surcharge Fund. So that's the most important part of this. And if that all comes into play, we'll be able to do projects, start the design at least immediately, start the outreach immediately, and the Granby, Blue Hills mainly, and there's work in West Hartford and some in Weathersfield and Newington. So we will be starting that as quickly as soon as we get the authority. I'll give you an update by email if we get anything back this week. In terms of, I sent this through Chairman Vicino through BPW. I've sent out an email regarding the MS4 issue and regionalism and those kinds of topics, which is a good topic to start to have. MS4, unfortunately, which is the Stormwater Authority regulation dictated by DEEP and EPA, is going to be growing over the years, and I think it's an important time to start talking about that at BPW. And then just for housekeeping on the operational side, we haven't had shutoffs for water non-payment in almost 3 years. And so this spring is shutoff season, and we're moving forward, and we want to make sure that everyone's aware of the process. We're going to be issuing a press release so everyone's aware. Mid-May, we'll be starting notifications, and then June we'll be doing shutoffs. We used to allow employees to come directly to customer service and to pay their bill if they got a shut-off notice. And because of COVID, and a lot of good things came from COVID, a lot of automation came from COVID. We now have, you can make your cash payments at CVS, Family Dollar, Walmart, Dollar General, and 7-Eleven. So now you want to pay your bill, you can go right in and pay your bill. It's real time, and you can get your Now, remember, when we shut water off, it's during the day, and we don't go back in the middle of the night. We used to do that years ago, and it creates lots of havoc. So we will be back the next day to turn that water on. Now, this is not to be confused with Commissioner Mandyke, as you asked. We also have another group of shutoffs, which we haven't executed yet, and that was the group of about 1,500 customers that have yet to have a new RF installed in their property, and basically refusing to allow us in. So we brought that to Water Bureau. We explained the process. We have not done anything yet. We will. There'll be lots of letters, including to the towns, to the legislators, about how we're doing this and how they can avoid MDC shutting off the water. So that's not to be confused with what we're doing in May. I'm not going to go through this, but I sent a very lengthy report on the Albany Avenue flooding situation, and got a lot of good responses from commissioners. I'm not going to belabor this point unless someone has questions, but we have, and this has been deferred to a special BPW meeting, I believe on the 16th.
16.
So we'll more than happy to answer any questions, but I won't belabor that.
I get,
Go ahead.
They're just explaining that it's going to be a public, isn't it a public hearing? Or-
Yes, it's a public hearing. We have, as I've reported, we have met on numerous occasions out in the field and at with Ms. Lane, Mr. Lane and Ms. Vasey directly in Albany Avenue. So we have given them a letter. We have basically determined, based on the facts in the field and based on the reports from both Ms. Vasey, Mr. Lane, and the proprietors which rent offices from Ms. Vasey, that the incident that occurred and the damage that occurred was because of the August 19th storm. And so the facts prove that, and like I said, I can go through any questions we have.
Just the idea, it's just it's a public hearing is involved in that,
It's a
isn't it?
public hearing at BPW,
Right.
and they've asked the advocate to be able to speak at a public hearing, which will be at the special BPW meeting, so we will definitely accommodate them.
Chair, just one question on that, if I could. Mr. Jelson, have we shared our findings with the City of Hartford and the Consumer Advocate?
Yes. Well, the
So
consumer-
we have shared our findings with the advocate, and I don't know if we have shared it with the City of Hartford. I have to ask John Myrtle. I do not know.
I'll confirm whether we have or haven't. If we have not, we will.
Yeah, if we could,
Yeah.
I think that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Yes. Unofficially, we have talked to the city staff, so, but officially, I'm not sure we have.
they're part of the whole process that we went through that Scott had discussions with.
This is, probably the most important item tonight, which is really, has a lot of legs. As everyone knows, we've been in discussions really since September of 2018 to prepare to remove ourselves from the Army Corps 1965 agreement in which the Army Corps built their flood control dam and really built it in the middle of our Goodwin Dam. Our Goodwin Dam was 6.5 billion gallons of, quote, future drinking water. When they built the flood control dam in 1960s, they basically cut 3.5 billion gallons of water that is now behind their Colebrook Dam. As part of that agreement, we did a bunch of things, including we were to pay 35% of the expend for the capital improvement of the dam. We were also to spend 35% of the maintenance cost of the dam for the life of the, quote, defined project. It also included 10 billion gallons of water. It defined more in elevation rather than in quantity, but it practically is 10 billion gallons of water if it's there. We've talked a lot about this over the years. It was very apparent to us in 2016 that the water is not there when you need it. So therefore, it's not an emergency drinking water source if it's not there during an emergency drought condition. So I hate to belabor this because we've talked so much about this, but we've exited the agreement. Our legal position is we physically have left. The hydro facility is dismantled. We're completely gone from this facility. I've been talking forever about the fact that the Army Corps has told us that the potential of the increases as in 2016 was $200,000 a year for our share, the 35%, and it doubled every year. Up in 2018-19, it was 900,000. They predicted it to go in 2021. They predicted it to go to 1.2 million, and that's in part why we decided to remove ourselves from that agreement. We've been arguing really since, 2019 over the bills that they've been billing us. We don't believe that they've satisfied the agreement in terms of providing us with the proper documentation. We've gotten lots of names and hours billed, but no specifics billed to the project. So we have declined to pay. We have just received a bill which really covers us up through 2020, and that bill is about $160,000, and that's for everything. So up through 2020 is approximately $160,000. Now, we were expecting that number to go to 1.2, and through all of this discussion with the Army Corps and the help we've had from our congressional help in Washington, we got a bill for the entire year of 2021 for $251,000. So they have dropped the price of what they had expected us to pay and what we expected to pay, and the total bill for 2021 is $251,000. So the concern we have still is this dam is a dam that will need significant improvements over the years. And this dam could cost the MDC, our 35% could be in the millions at some day. So we have a dam that is withholding water for a, quote, future potential emergency drinking water source that has proven since the 60s. In my email, I've identified a number of issues that have occurred where the environmental groups and the watershed groups have said, we do not want this water to be diverted away from the West Branch, and those are facts. We even were intervened when we tried to write an agreement with the town of Portland in 1995. We had to enter an agreement with the Farmington River Watershed Association in 2000, because the concern has always been the water that is released from Colebrook and then in turn released at the face of our dam is released to the river. There's no infrastructure, as we know, to get the water from our facility, Goodwin, to Barkhamsted. In 1981, there was a referendum for the MDC to spend $65 million to build a tunnel, a drinking water tunnel, to Barkhamsted. Only 700 feet of it was built back when it was Goodwin was constructed. And you know, as you can imagine, I wasn't there, and I don't think most of us were, but just like what happened in 2013 with UConn, there was an extreme fight against the MDC diverting water away from the river and to a drinking water reservoir system. So we strongly believe that this water will not ever be a drinking water source. It can't be. Practically, the Army Corps Dam releases water because of flood control. So if you can imagine MDC releasing 50 CFS every day from Barkhamsted during the 2016 drought because of stream flow regulations like we do at Goodwin and Colebrook, our reservoir was remember, we never hit 75%. We never lost more than 25% of our water in our Barkhamsted reservoir. If we would have released that minimum 50 CFS, which is 32 million gallons a day, we would have been down to below 50%. So a reservoir system cannot afford to store water and then release it for anything other than drinking water. But that's what's happening at this reservoir system. When the Army Corps Dam was built, it made it impossible for our Goodwin and our water behind Colebrook to be used as a drinking water source. I mean, one of the definitions of a drinking water source is you must have a calculation, a safe yield calculation. Like how much water, once you pump water out, how much, or gravity flow water out, how much water comes back in? What's the rate of return back into that reservoir? It's impossible to calculate that when you've got billions of gallons being released because of spring thaw with snow. Anticipating, another spring storm. That's what the Army Corps does. They're anticipating the reservoir's full, Colebrook's full. We need to release water now so that we can prepare for another rainstorm. So for a lot of technical reasons and for practical reasons, the state of Connecticut, DPH, has never, since 1967, ever supported the use of that water for anything other than wild and scenic and the minimum stream flow releases that we're required to comply with, which we're more than willing to comply with, to the West Branch. The riparian rights component, which cost about $270,000 a year. If we don't release 27 billion gallons of water in a year, we have to pay the Farmington River Power Company about $270,000. But we're spending millions every year to save $270,000. So we've met with them. We've made them understand that we're no longer, the Army Corps has been put on notice with my letter, we're no longer going to be utilizing the 10 billion gallons to help mitigate the cost impacts of not meeting riparian rights. The next steps, I'll let Chris talk about, but we did have a meeting, as you saw in my email. We talked at length with DPH Commissioner and their AG. Our position is really clear. We don't own the water. We only own the water by way of contract. We're not in the contract anymore, so it's impossible to own something that you don't have a contract for. And even more importantly, this water is not, by definition, a drinking water source, by the state of Connecticut's definition. It's a future possible potential emergency drinking water source, but it's not defined as a drinking water source in our water supply plan or under state statute. And we don't own it anymore. So as I said to the commissioner and to the AG, if the Army Corps so chose to remove themselves from this agreement for whatever reason, the state of Connecticut could not intervene and force the Army Corps to continue on with this agreement forever. And our position is the same way. We only own that water by way of a lease. And that lease, our position is that project ended at the day the debt service was paid off on that original project, the dike, dam, and that was January of 2019. So we are unfortunately going to have to go through a process with DPH, and we will do that. I'm going to leave that to Chris, but we are adamant that, and I asked this question, and if it's so, if DPH so believes that this water is a future possible potential emergency drinking water source, and it's something that the state should save for years to come, our position is that's fine, but why should our 8-member towns and our 4 non-member towns and some of our other communities, why should they pay for that forever with no hope of ever needing it or ever going to use that for a purpose of drinking water? You can't use this water without a diversion permit. So we've asked, would you be willing to support a diversion permit? And history has shown they have not. So the question is, would you support a diversion permit if we were so to lose this argument, legal argument with the AG's office and DPH? And they said they couldn't commit to that. So our 8 towns have got to pay in perpetuity forever for some possible future drinking water source that will practically never be able to be used as a drinking water source because of the way the Army Corps operates its dam. And like I said, history has shown every time we've tried to get a diversion permit, the latest was 2013. And if anybody was around during the UConn Storrs campus, it was like the world was going to end. There was everybody was against us. They did not want us to divert that water anywhere except to the West Branch of the Farmington River. So with that, I had some other things, but I went a little longer.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Yeah, there's,
Scott?
yeah, go ahead. Are there questions? Go ahead.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner
So,
Salem.
Scott, maybe, there may be some commissioners who haven't seen this actual physical relationship between the two dams. In fact, you could stand on our Goodwin Dam and look upriver and see the Colebrook Dam. It's that close.
Right.
I mean, you know, you can actually see
Eye
the
vision,
Colebrook
yeah.
Dam, which is at a higher elevation, so you can see it from the Goodwin Dam. So the money that you know, we've been sending to the Army Corps is for the management of the Colebrook Dam, and we did have an interest in it at one point with the hydroelectric plant, which has been gone since 2018.
Yes.
Or 19. yeah.
That was the last year we ran.
Officially 19, January 19.
So that money, it goes towards the maintenance of the Colebrook Dam. But the Colebrook Dam can't do anything unless the Goodwin Dam, you know, like, is tied to it. So if they release millions of gallons of water to try to stop flooding, you know,
That's what it
then
was,
we
a
have to
flood
release it
control.
at the Goodwin Dam.
Correct.
So the money that we're paying the federal government doesn't pay for the Goodwin Dam.
No.
Our customers are paying for the Goodwin Dam, which at this point is not doing anything for us.
Right.
It's really not doing anything for us. It's not impounding any drinking water. It's not, the land around it is watershed land, and so there's nothing we could do with it. You know, there's basically no development allowed on it. We can't really sell it or do anything with it. So, but we're paying to maintain the Goodwin Dam. I don't know at this point what the annual cost of maintaining the Goodwin Dam is, but that's not going to go away. Even if we win this case with Colebrook, we're still going to be paying for that, which basically manages the flow to the west branch of the Farmington River. And by the way, the Bark-Amstead Reservoir winds up in the east branch. They all wind up in the Farmington River. It's not like they're going to a different part of the state. They're all headed to the same direction, which is when they connect, and it hits the Connecticut River and Windsor. But
And Commissioner, if I may.
please, just take
Just
the
wanna clarify.
interrelationship and the cost of the two, if you could.
Yeah, let me just clarify, and that's, you made a good point, but is, just to be very clear, there's a number of different environmental concerns for us to walk away from this agreement. DPH's concern is that it's a potential emergency drinking water source. Other environmental concerns are, we want you to keep it as potential emergency drinking water source, and it's not defined. There is no definition of that in the state statute. But by doing that, in order for you to abandon that, you have to go through a process. And to go through a process, the biggest concern the environmentals have, concerns, is we'll sell the land. We've already gone on record in 2019 to the state, to the watershed towns, to Farmington River Watershed Rivers Alliance. We will not ever sell land for one reason. Because the land, about 6,000 acres, that surrounds Colebrook also surrounds Goodwin. And Goodwin is a small bathtub that's being fed from a big bathtub. So we have to protect the land around Colebrook in order to protect the water in Goodwin. Unfortunately, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking from 1960s, the Army Corps Dam, the way it operates, we agreed by statute, by Allied Town Agreement initially, and then by statute per our charter, we've agreed to release a minimum of 50 CFS, which is 32 million gallons a day, to a maximum of 150. So whatever comes in, we have to let go, right? We have to release everything that comes through. So we have to protect the watershed even in the Colebrook area, just like the Goodwin area. But because we release everything that comes in, our bathtub at Goodwin is only 3 billion gallons of water, 2.5 billion gallons. It could only hold 2.5. Everything over 2.5 goes over the spillway. So we only have 2.5 billion gallons of emergency potential drinking water that we still have to release a minimum of 32 million gallons a day. Now, in 2016, if you remember my long presentation on the articles, the pictures of the mud puddle behind Colebrook.
That was a drought, too.
That was the drought, right? And so even our water that we say we own in fee, the 3 billion gallons in Goodwin and the 3.5 billion gallons behind Colebrook, that's subject to this release. And we can't predict what's going to happen. But this is really simple when you think about it this way. The DPH would say you have to protect that water for future water supply for somebody. Okay. So will you give us a diversion permit? No. Why not? Well, because you don't need it. You know, that's probably some of the logic. The question becomes, how could you ever, this 10 billion gallons, how could you ever sell it to anybody when you never know if it's going to be there? If I'm buying water and I'm Portland, and Portland says I want a minimum of 400,000 gallons a day, a maximum of 1.1 million gallons, a peak of 2 million, the water's got to be there. But if you've got 10 billion gallons of water that's potential future drinking water, who would possibly pay you for something that you're not sure is going to be there when you need it?
That's
So-
your argument.
Right.
Commissioner Sweezy and then Commissioner Bush. Go ahead.
You said we're gone, but we're still being charged, your words.
Correct.
You said 2021, 251,000. 2020, 800 plus thousand.
Yep.
When you look at those itemized bills, or maybe I'll ask the question to Bob, when he looks at those itemized bills, where's the huge difference? I mean, how can they drop that from one number to another
yeah.
number? When you look at the itemized bills, there's got to be things that are equal.
Yeah, we agree with you. That's our point.
That's a $64,000
Our point is,
question.
yeah, our point is, the way that they, is extremely confusing the way they were billing us. They've changed it this coming year, 2021 and 2022. But what they used to do is they used to give us, as you know, they'd give us a guesstimate in December. So we'd have a number. They'd say the number is 800,000. Whatever the number was. But they had money from the previous year that they hadn't spent yet. So we're building like, we've got a running tab, so to speak. And then they would spend whatever they spend throughout the year, and then they'd in a sense give us a true-up in April, May timeframe of, you know, what it was. So they had a couple of years where they didn't spend any money, so they got a big true-up. And that's why up and through to 2020, we only owe them 160. Remember, we budgeted $1.4 million because we were afraid that we were going to get this $900,000 bill. The $900,000 bill wound up being $250,000. So I believe, in part, it's because of all the hard questions we've been asking, and we still have yet to receive information from them that justifies the billing from 2016 right up through today. So. Yeah, the true-up is only $160,000, but we gave them $800,000 in 2018 and 19.
Commissioner Bush?
A couple points that I wanted to bring up have already been brought up, but I do have one other thing. I guess my question is above current population levels now, like if there was an increase in population or an increase in usage, how much more usage can we sustain with our current level of water?
Sure. So in 2013, the MDC had a foolish idea to sell water to Yukon, and the world ended. The state created a state water plan in 2014. And the state brought in a professor from UMass, and I forgot his name, and somebody's going to tell me his name.
No,
They did a study, presentation, a state of, what is it? Yeah, Dr. Palmer. He brought in all of these charts, and these charts showed that in 2007, we all thought that water was going to follow population. And unfortunately, what we weren't watching was the regulation that was being imposed by EPA. So as everybody knows, you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you buy a toilet or a shower head, you can only buy a shower head or a toilet that is EPA compliant. So washing machines, I've said this a million times, washing machines, a front-loaded washing machine is 9 gallons per load versus an old top load, 40 gallons. Appliances themselves has reduced the consumption by 75% in a household. right? Just think about the washing machine, right? Think about the showers and the toilets.
Toilets, 9, it's
Right, so-
1.5 now, it was 9.
So you're cutting the water consumption. So what they showed, Dr. Palmer showed, was all of these companies across the country predicted what their water supply would need to be from 2007 into their 2015, 2020, and everybody was wrong. So they've proven that population growth is not increasing water demand. So, but to the point in the 80s, right? In the 80s, we were using well above, 65, 70, 80 million gallons a day. We are now using 45 to 47. But
What is the maximum capacity of that we could extract per day without?
100.
68, we could,
We had
there's a
summers
number of
with
different
100.
criteria, but we could sell, by state statute, by DPH regulation, we could sell 68 million gallons of water a day. And the way that they calculate is your safe yield, you have to subtract your sales, like to Portland, to Unionville. Any contracts that you have to be subtracted. So we could sell right now 68 million gallons of water a day without any need for Colebrook or Goodwin. We're using 47, 45. It's been dropping over the years. But the really important point about Colebrook is, can you actually use it for drinking water? Like, is it there? Can you calculate a safe yield? Can you say, just say, for example, the town of Canton wanted water. And we said, okay, we're going to sell you 10 million gallons of water a day, but you have to be able to deliver it, And if you're relying on that water source, and you don't know whether or not it's going to be there because of a drought or because of releases by the Army Corps, how can you possibly enter into an agreement?
You keep saying never, 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 but it could be if we got a diversion permit or we were able to access the water in some capacity.
No, I'm saying there's two issues, right? So you need a diversion permit to actually divert it to our infrastructure at Barkhamsted, right? You can't flow it down the river. And most people don't realize the Farmington River, once you get past, the East Branch, there's 9 wastewater treatment plants that discharge into that river. So some of the argument would be, well, we would dump that water in the river in an emergency, and DPH suggested that we'd pump it out. Well, there's only 2 states in the country that use Class A water for drinking water. That's us and Rhode Island. Why would we drop water into a river, which is a Class B water body, because there's 9 wastewater treatment plants that dump into that river? Why would we pump water out of the river? I mean, and one, you need a diversion permit to do that. So you got the diversion permit issue, right? But then you have the practical side of that 10 billion gallons is not there all the time. In our Goodwin, in our Barkhamsted and Neepog reservoirs, that water is there. We know it's there. We measure it. We don't release it unless people drink it, right? We don't release it unless it overflows over the spillway. But if you have somebody else over the control of that dam, which we don't control the Army Corps dam, they do. So they have their own reasons for releasing. But if they release all the water in early spring because they're anticipating a very wet spring, and like what happened in 2016, there's no rain, then we had literally a mud puddle behind the Colebrook Reservoir. And we still had to release 32 million gallons of water every day from our reservoir, which we got to the point where we almost got to the point where we had to stop and ask permission from DEEP to not meet our minimum stream flow. So there's a bunch of issues. It's not just the diversion permit. The practical side is, Commissioner, that the water is being released and we don't have control over the release of it, even though it's ours. We don't have the control over it. So it may not be there And may doesn't work when when you're signing a contract with a community to provide water.
Can we ask to take control of the dam? Can we take control of that dam?
No.
Oh, my God, why would you?
Don't want to take control.
No, 1955 flood, 1936, 1937 flood.
The 55
The reason why
is-
they built those dams is because of those protected communities along the river. So their functionality of their dam is significantly different than ours.
So it's not a water drinking
No,
water.
no. And it will, and because of its nature, our dam, our Goodwin Dam, will never, ever, ever be a drinking water source. Because when they release water, we have to release it. It's just the nature of how they have to operate. So our position is, we're happy to comply with the wild and scenic. We're happy to release the minimum stream flows, to keep the river, we call it the regime flow, to make sure that the river is the way everybody expects it. We want to be that steward, because of what we do on West Branch, we're exempt from stream flow regulations on our other drinking water dams. But to the point it's really important to make, if we did exactly what we did on Colebrook and Goodwin in 2016 to our drinking water reservoirs, Barkhamsted, our reservoirs would have been less than 50% full. And, it gets to a point where you can say 50% is a lot of water, right? But the quality of water, you're dealing with quality now. But we never got there. We were at 75%, and we had the poor town of New Britain. We were bringing them water, we were giving them their 5 million gallons of water a day.
10, weren't we?
Yeah, up to 10. Manchester, a lot of communities that have smaller well systems or reservoirs that aren't as deep, they had a significant problem. Down southwest part of the state was they were building temporary pipelines along the road. So it cannot be ever a drinking water source, and that's our position. We believe we're right. And if we're wrong, the argument would be, then why not give us the diversion permit now, right? So I'm going to defer.
Okay, yes, Commissioner Patel, and then,
Apart from all technical arguments, important thing is, does State Health Department have any legal grounds to get involved? And based on what you explain and we know, they don't. So let's simply challenge and not do anything what they are telling us to do. That is, quote unquote, have a hearing. So when you start the process of hearing at their suggestion, then you are getting involved. Just don't do it. And then let our legal department deal with it.
Commissioner Payne?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we still don't have the infrastructure, and even if we put the infrastructure in, we'd only have 3 billion gallons if we had that, so we wouldn't even have enough
Right.
to pay for the, $75
Oh, way more
million
than that,
or
100
more?
it was-
That was $1981.
So what's
Right,
that,
so you're
100?
talking 700 million.
Right.
Right?
And none of that water has ever been used as a safe yield for our
No.
water. So
No.
we're not calculating that water.
It's impossible to calculate it,
The-
right?
yeah, the significant part of that issue was the 1955 flood, because when the 55 flood came, you also had the expansion of those towns below that Scott was just talking about, that discharge into that river. There was, after the war, was a big exodus from the cities to the suburban development, and as a result, you have a flood control situation on the Farmington River, and that's really what those were used for. Never thought to be a drinking source on those, they're compensating reservoirs.
I'll make a motion.
Any further questions? Commissioner Salemi?
Just one last thing. So what I was getting at before, Scott, was that if there's no possibility to use it for drinking water, then the contract that we had is more or less null and void anyways.
Is your speaker on?
I think it's
Excuse me, yeah.
feedback.
So when they built the Colebrook Dam, I'm sorry, is there someone else?
Yeah, well, that's that's telephone. People are on the telephone.
I'm sorry. Did you call on me or them? I thought you called on me.
Called on you.
Okay.
You're
I'm sorry. So when they built the Colebrook Dam, with no chance of using the Goodwin Reservoir's water for water supply. It made the Goodwin Dam superfluous. It doesn't need to be there. We don't need to, but we're operating it outside the cost of the funds that we're paying to the Army Corps, which we would like not to pay anymore. We still have the Goodwin Dam to operate. It's there. We can't change that. But once that Colebrook Dam was built, without being able to use it for water supply, the Goodwin Dam is really superfluous. Doesn't need to be there. It's not really doing anything except releasing the water that they release. That was my point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any further questions on this issue? We can finish the Chief Executive's report. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I hate to even go any further, so I'm going to defer to Mr. Stone.
Do you want to take a break? Go ahead.
I'm not going to take a look at it, and don't give him a break. No, we're all set.
Sorry.
No, do you have anything else?
No, I don't.
All right.
You're all set.
At the risk of, I won't repeat all that Scott said.
Chris, go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Stone, District Counsel. Rather than repeat all that Scott had said, which is very informative, and it's exactly what he and I laid out to DPH during our telephone conversation a few weeks ago. And while we were commended for our presentation, it didn't lead to a positive result. So that being said, we do have a path forward on a legal basis, and to pick up on Commissioner Patel's point, it will be handled through a declaratory ruling application that we are preparing, will be filed within the next 20 days or so. That action will be before a DPH-assigned hearing officer who will hear it, they call it de novo, but there'll be evidence that will be presented from our side, from DPH's side, and we'll get a decision on DPH's opinion in relatively short order. Now, I say that with some degree of hesitancy, but I have spoken with the Attorney General, who is the of counsel to DPH, and he anticipates between 90 and 120 days as being a realistic time frame for when we can get a decision, which frankly in the legal world, as you'll find out shortly, is a relatively quick turnaround. I just want to point out one thing that Scott, and emphasize one thing that Scott did bring up. DPH's jurisdictions extends to public water supplies. Absent getting to that point, all the other regulations that they cited in their opinion, their informal guidance, we don't get to. So you got to pass that threshold issue. Under our general statutes, DPH has a specific jurisdiction. It's stated in the statute, and they don't meet that criteria, in our opinion, in this particular case. And that's fundamentally, that's the basis for our claim. There's another option here that we offered to the state, because under the 1963 statute that created these works by the Army Corps of Engineers, the statute provides for what's called a public option, and it's either to the state or another interested party can become the partner of the Army Corps of Engineers and build and maintain structures like the Colebrook Dam. We, in fact, became that local interest that shared in the responsibility, and at the time, thought we shared in the benefit. As it turns out, time being what it is, a great teacher, we've learned that we have not shared in the benefit of that project.
Well, will we?
However, the remedy for us not paying the bill, and we're not paying the bill, even though we're getting them, is that we lose the claim of the space that at any given time has nothing in it and may have water in it at any given time, but we lose the claim to that space. We've offered to the state to become the local interest at the Colebrook Reservoir and have them take over the space and have them pay the 35% of the maintenance charges and capital improvement charges. And oddly enough, they declined to take us up on that offer. But that is under the federal regulation. That is a possibility, and they refuse to do that. And I understand why, because there's nothing there to buy or to lease. So we'll proceed. I'll keep the board posted. You'll get copies of the filings that we make. It'll be in short order, and we intend on moving forward that very quickly.
Chris,
Yes.
one question. What happens to the process in Washington relative to the federal legislation?
Well, what's interesting,
Where does that
yeah,
stand?
what's interesting, we have an amendment that's in the subcommittees. It's had a, what they call a members' hearing. It'll go to a public hearing on the amendment. There's concern raised initially by the federal delegation staff members about what DPH's position is, and they asked us, and there may be a difference of opinion between Scott and I as to what they've asked us, but in my opinion, they asked us at least to reach out to DPH and have a conversation about what their position is.
Right.
And we did that, and that's one of the things that, as you know from prior meetings, we've been waiting for, and it finally happened. And it was only a week before that meeting was held that we got a copy of a informal guidance from the AG's office. So we can only, state government only moves so fast, and obviously we wish they would have moved a little quicker. That being said, the Washington staff knows that we met with DEEP. They were part of the phone call that we held 2 weeks ago, or thereabouts. I think maybe it was 3 weeks ago. So they participated. They know what DPH's position is. They know what our position is. After that meeting, we reached out to them and said, now what? And they indicated to us that they were less concerned about DPH's position and more concerned about the response from the Army Corps of Engineers would be. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers has had plenty of time to formulate a formal response to us withdrawing from this contract. Their legislative drafting office, the legislative drafting office of the Army Corps of Engineers, drafted the amendment that sits on the Senate and House calendar in Washington. That being said, we have a, where was I in this? Oh, yeah, finishing up, thank you. Just the Washington. So after they knew about the Army Corps' drafting of the legislation, of the amendment, they were concerned that the Army Corps would object to us getting out of the contract because of money. And not because they think that we should continue on paying what we're paying, but they want to replace, within their budget, they have to replace the money that they would be losing. We emphasize to our Washington representatives that rather than the Army Corps be concerned about what they're losing, they should be grateful for what they've received over the past 59 years, in us paying for, at times, over $1 million a year for the capital improvements, plus the operation and maintenance of the dam, and getting essentially nothing for it. So that's a political issue. I hope they'll deal with it. There's enough money at the federal level, they print it every day, for them to make up the budget shortfall between what we're paying the Army Corps and what we're not paying the Army Corps going forward. So that's the core issue. I'd want to answer any questions you might have. Be more than happy to.
One more question. This is not an uncommon process that states exercise through the United States Congress and Senate to relieve themselves of relationships with the Army Corps. Is that not true?
Yep, when we first introduced that concept to this board, I made it clear that not only is it not unusual, but in Connecticut, on 3 different occasions, through Representative Joe Courtney of the 2nd District, put through amendments that effectively decommissioned or deauthorized projects, including an Army Corps project. So it's not unusual. In fact, I won't say it's common, but it happens a lot in D.C. So
Seems to be a common process.
So, and when you look at the fairness issue here, it's clear, and pictures tell, say 1,000 words, right? You see the pictures from the drought in 2016. You see that the Colebrook, the entire reservoir is a mud pit. So we think we have a good case, certainly on the equities and the public policy, and we also think we have a good case on the law.
Commissioner Torres.
Thank you. Unfortunately, common sense doesn't really run big in Washington, and it hasn't really been big on reparations, as far as I know. But I have two questions. One is, did the contract with the Army Corps of Engineers stipulate Colbert as a public water source?
It says that the local interest, in this case the MDC, and it recites it under our agreement, have a right to use that space for the storage of a public water supply.
Is that the rationale?
And I'm sorry.
I'm
if I
just-
might-
Is that why the DPH is referring to it as a water source?
No. First of all, the federal government, and certainly not the Army Corps of Engineers by agreement, can't change the nature of that, whatever that is, or the jurisdiction of the DPH by calling it a source of water supply. The fact is it's not. And under the statute, our statute that created DPH and sets forth their jurisdiction, they have jurisdiction over water supply. Water supply, they do at least partially define, has that body of water from which water is taken. We haven't taken water from the Colbert Reservoir ever,
And the
in
other,
large part because it hasn't been there whenever we would have needed it. But
now, you said that at some point there will be a hearing officer appointed by DPH, and they'll have a decision, or come up with some kind of answer to this question. Is there, if it goes against us, do we still have the opportunity for an appeal?
yes,
Is that appeal through the courts, or?
yes,
what-
yes. In the jurisdiction, the venue is Hartford Superior Court.
Further questions on this issue? If not, go ahead.
Thank you.
Chris.
The second issue, there's three issues tonight. The second issue I'd like to discuss is the landfill issue. You've been getting emails over the past several weeks on this. We are close to the end of the session. We had hoped for, and there is still a glimmer of hope for a legislative resolution of this issue. Every day that goes by, I'm less confident that that's going to happen, but I do also know that it's midnight Wednesday when the session's over, and a lot of things have happened at the last minute. There have been active discussions with the governor's office, with Paul Mounds and the governor's attorney, Nora Danahy, and they've been certainly courteous, but to some extent constructive in terms of fashioning a path forward. But it's not there, we're not there yet. And I don't want to sound overly optimistic, and I don't want to sound naive, but I also have about 48 hours or 54 hours left in a session that who knows what's going to happen. We did get a budget out. There was a budget document that was created today. I believe it was approved or considered by the Board of by the Finance Committee on the revenue side this afternoon. They're either going to vote on it in the House today or spend the night debating the budget and voting on it relatively soon.
Tomorrow it's
Then it
gonna
goes
go
on
up
to the
and down.
Senate. But we're not included in that, but that does not mean that we can't reach an agreement and other funds could be used to fund an agreement. And as you know, as all of you know, we did have, and through the work of Scott and to some extent the legal office a few years back, had a working document with staff at DEEP and the AG's office that reflected a reasonable approach to this issue. It was never considered by this board because there were two blanks in that document. One was how much the state would pay going back, and the second blank was how much they would pay going forward. And that's,
That was the issue.
they said, we that's the governor's decision. I get it. That's OPM's decision. We all get it. But we had a 5 to 6 page document that set forth the rules from now until 10 years from now. So we don't have to reinvent that to get this thing done. So I'll keep you posted as often as when I get things over the next 54 hours, you'll get them. And I had thought about asking for some range tonight, but it's going to be what they're going to offer, and then it's going to be our decision whether to accept or not. And there's not going to be, we don't have the time, quite frankly, to go back and forth negotiating numbers. It's really going to come down to that. But it'll be a decision you'll have to make. It's not going to be made by me, it's not going to be made by Scott. It's going to be made by this board, and we can get into that, obviously. I hope we have that discussion, quite frankly. That means that there's something on the table that it's worth discussing. It's not the place to do it now. We're still waiting. That's the, and any other questions?
Commissioner Salimi?
Sorry.
Can you, or would you please explain how the other issue got tied to this, the other groundwater issue got tied to this from the Buckingham Street garage, which doesn't have poisonous effluent coming out of it like the landfill, but does have groundwater?
Well, it's groundwater. It's the same, I mean, it's the same argument.
Well,
for both.
it's just, the point is, though, it's just dirty water. It's not, doesn't have ammonia in it or PFAS, but go ahead.
Well,
Please.
the state linked it. You can only imagine why. They want to resolve as much as they can. And I indicated to them that not that you've acted, but I would assume that my board would react to that, or their reaction to that is a function of the amount you're paying.
But they were paying for this. The point is, they
They're not paying
were
for it.
paying for it before.
That is,
And then they, at some point, decided not to pay for it anymore and to put it together with the landfill issue. That was my point.
well, they haven't paid it for a while. And I thought your question was, why did they link it now? They linked it now because they know it's an issue out there and they want to resolve as much as they could. They were paying it for a extended period of time, and then they stopped. And you can only imagine why they stopped, is because when we were talking with their counsel and Deep, we would cite the example of Buckingham Street has an instance where they were paying the right charge.
And I had asked Scott that, an idea of what they were paying when they were paying for Buckingham Street Garage. What amount were they paying, and how much have we lost since then?
I think it was about $60,000 a month.
Yeah, they were paying $60,000 a month. Just so, for everyone's benefit, the state of Connecticut built a garage on Buckingham, basically 3 floors deep. And obviously, a building like that, 3 floors deep, you create groundwater. So you got a construction dewatering circumstance, and then you have a lifetime of groundwater that's going to be generated. So their construction manager, Gilbane, under their agreement with the state, paid the $60,000 a month to the MDC as part of the capital investment of the dewatering of the project, which was fine. The state, I met with the state after the construction, and they told us they hadn't budgeted this money, and the money wasn't $60,000, it was in the $30,000 range, because part of it was due to construction activity itself. So they did start to pay it, and probably paid, I'm guessing, 8 months or so, until, as Chris pointed out, we were always using Buckingham State project as an example of why the state would pay it here and not pay it here. And then subsequent to that,
The way they fixed it is not paying a landfill
Right.
charge,
So
but not
so
paying.
they were just saying they're consistent. They weren't paying, period.
And they knew what they were paying at Buckingham.
Well, the point about that is during the construction or during the design of the Buckingham Street Garage and 165 Capitol Avenue, the reconstruction of the old state office building, the state had an opportunity to dispose of this in a different way that wouldn't involve the MDC, and they chose not to. They knew that there was in order to obtain the permit from the MDC for both projects, that they had to make a decision which way they were going to go. And they did have an opportunity to dispose of it in a different way, as if it were stormwater, and not wind up in the MDC's sewer system, including the drainage from the building and parking lot at 165 Capitol Avenue, which winds up getting in our system at the corner of Hudson and Capitol Avenue. And and we're accepting that, and I don't think there's any charge for that. That's just kind of going through there. And the only other thing I'd like to point out about the landfill is that, going back to before the state decided it didn't want to pay for what we sent them, CRRA was charged with managing the landfill for a time, the Hartford landfill for a time, and other landfills. And in the documentation that, where they turn over the management of the closure of the Hartford landfill and the long-term management of that landfill to DEEP, along with something like $33 million from their reserve fund that went to the state of Connecticut in order to do those things, was their proposal to build a treatment facility for the effluent that comes out of it, what we're receiving now. And so that was in the documentation. And the only reason I know that is that I was going to the CRA meetings, and I was also getting sent minutes of the meetings that I couldn't go to or didn't have time to go to back then. And we had our people watching this. In fact, our union, the union guys were going to those meetings too. I used to sit next to them when I went to the meetings. So it became obvious that there was a problem with this effluent and that it should be dealt with by treating it on site. Well, once that got turned over to the state, it just sort of disappeared until we found that this stuff was damaging our system, the pipe, and the system at the plant. And so, you know, on both occasions, both at the landfill and at Buckingham Street, the state had alternatives and chose not to use them. So, you know, we don't have any alternatives now. We have to accept this and we have to treat it when it gets to the plant. And we know that they tried a treatment facility, a temporary treatment facility. Scott, they only ran it for a few weeks or something?
3 days. It was
Carbon
carbon filters, yeah.
But they proved that they can treat the water.
They did remove the PFAS
Water coming out of
down
it.
below the EPA
Well,
standards.
the ammonia is really more important than PFAS, because PFAS is everywhere now, but I mean, the ammonia is what's really doing the damage to the pipe and everything, so, but they were able to treat that at the facility. So it's possible to treat this effluent before it damages our system. But in none of these agreements or proposed agreements to pay the MDC, whatever amount the legislature finally decides, there's nothing about establishing a treatment facility anywhere in there.
Right.
And I think that before we have any finalized agreement, that there should be some sort of, you know, future plan to deal with this, because we're getting 70 to 80,000 gallons a day out of
More than that, 85 to 90.
85 to 90,000 gallons of poisonous.
And that's,
poisonous.
you know, that's the max, right? So it
Yeah.
varies throughout the
Varies.
year.
But it's poisonous effluent. It's not just dirty water. So it's the result of the landfill, basically, and all the stuff that got put in that landfill for almost 100 years, you know, deteriorating and turning into this ammonia, basically. So I think looking forward, whether we get an agreement or not, there should be something about a treatment facility for that. And I don't think that accepting some amount of funding on behalf of the member towns, because they're going to get this money, whatever we get, it's going directly to the member towns to reduce the ad valorem. But it still leaves us with a landfill with effluent that's basically a poisonous material, and 80,000 gallons of it every single day. So what do we do about that? That's my question.
I guess that's an issue, and I had a question for the chief legal counsel. I believe in the process of this discussion, the state felt they had a pretty good case in court. It was related sometime in some of the discussions. And I guess it was directed at the 1997 agreement that MDC made with the CRRA. Then
One factor, yeah.
that's one of the factors. But that was for groundwater, was it not?
No, it was for this.
discharge for the landfill.
Landfill, but we were under the impression that it was groundwater. We never knew that it was what it actually is. Not to speak of the fact that that same 90 or 80 or 70 or whatever the average is, 1,000 gallons a day is loaded with PFAS, too, coming out of that, which goes into our system. And there's going to have to be some regulation on that, which there isn't right now, in the future. So I guess it's more to come relative to what's going to
My
happen.
point, Mr. Chairman, was when they learned how bad, for lack of a better word, I keep saying poisonous, but when they learned how bad this stuff was, they proposed a treatment facility in the closure documents for the Hartford landfill. It's there. All you got to do is look it up and see it.
Right.
And it just disappeared. After they turned over the $33 million, that proposal disappeared.
Well, they took 33 million out of it and they put it into the general fund. Wasn't that what they did? They started with 50.
I don't know if they spent the whole 33 million by giving
I
it back.
think there
to
was
the
50
general
put in
fund,
there
but-
originally on bond money, and they spent somewhere in the area of 20 to do whatever they had to do for closure. Left a balance in there, and then when we had the budget shortfall 8 or 9 years ago, they swept all that money out, and it was gone. The more difficult issue was the carbon test that they did with the carbon filters. We asked them for information on how successful it was, and they refused to give it to us, didn't they, Scott?
Well, actually, the chronology of this was we were asking for, a composition of what was being discharged, and they had done a test, and they had done this pilot test, which we knew that they were doing, and we were asking for them results, and so this was October of 2019, I believe, it might be 18. I'm sorry.
I think it was
And-
18.
Yeah, it was 18. So we're asking for the results of the test, and it wasn't until the accident at the airport that we asked them point blank, because the Ray Friggin from Deep, who was quoted in the Hartford Current, that the largest generator of PFAS is landfills.
Right.
So we immediately asked for, that day, we asked in writing for their results. When they did the results in October, did they find any PFAS? And that's when we found, they gave us the results of the fact that their carbon filtered pilot that they did for 3 days did in fact lower the PFAS count from the site down well below the regulations by EPA. But
That was the ESES that they had, what the composition was.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to share that with us, so we had testing done and so forth. Commissioner Sweezy?
Yeah, at the next meeting, Chris, Scott, could you come back, because we're not gonna get the money, I mean, it's 99%. Come back with the options that you feel we can do moving forward. I'm not gonna ask tonight, but I know pretty close how much we have spent over the last few years with legal, consultants, I don't even care about a list, what total dollars of what we've spent. I mean, this is a pattern at the MDC. It's like Commissioner Patel said today, maybe we shouldn't even have the public hearing. We should just walk back, don't pay it, the bill on the Colebrook Dam. When you see the expenses we've paid on this, it's gonna be, $1 million. Go back to CRRA, we spent $10 million in legal bills to collect $8 million. Just come back with the options,
We'll
and
do
let
that.
us, the board, consider where we go
No, that's
in the
fair.
future.
Yeah, that's fair.
We'll have some
Right.
perspective on what's happened and why it happened.
I don't think we need any more.
Are there further, I'm sorry, Commissioner Taylor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, when you look at this issue, I would hope that one of the issues that would be considered or would be thought about when you're going to get back to us is I'd like to get some idea as to what was the expense of the mitigation efforts on the part of the state relative to the expense that we're going to face, because don't forget, this water is running through our pipes, and we're going to have to replace them. And in addition, I would imagine that the EPA, when push comes to shove, if the PFAS and all the other stuff is going into the Connecticut River, we're going to be left holding the bag.
It's a big bag.
So I would think that we would like to know out the box I mean, if there's going to be some kind of processing plant that can be constructed, even if basically, we do it as a demonstration project. But we do it so that essentially we've got the data, we've got the engineering. Because at some point, this issue is going to have to be resolved. And more particularly, we've got to deal with what's happening to our capital plant, the pipes down there. So,
I think that's what we'll do, is we'll get the information
We'll
put
also-
together, and our legal counsel can give us some direction and advice.
And I want you to be assured that both at the state level and in Washington, we're keeping an eye on all proposals relative to PFAS, and not just treatment standards, but liability. And we don't want to be considered a generator just because we're transporting it, not by choice, transporting it from point A to point B. So, and so far, generally receptive to that concept, that it shouldn't be us just by accepting it as being considered a generator. So we're keeping an eye on that.
Andy? Commissioner Adel, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And is it on? Thanks, Dave.
Here it goes.
I also would want to make sure that one of the options would be, and I know Ray's point is very well taken, is what our options would be in federal court.
Well, whatever, federal, state,
Well, state, we're
Well,
we're suing the state.
But just so we're clear, you'd still be suing the state and federal court. And so the laws of governmental
state of
immunity still
Connecticut
apply. It's just in a different venue. I mean, there may be other actions you may consider, but not anything that would be a direct, what I'll call collection action against the state. That's why we're in the Claims Commissioner's office on two matters, one pre-January 2020, I believe, and one post-January 2020. We went from a straight rate of 13 cents to a tiered rate, 13, 9, and 5 in 2020. So we got those two actions. One of those, the first action is on the fast track. They've appointed, I think, 12 to 15 temporary attorney generals to handle the backlog of the state's claims commissioner, who has about 4,000 cases plus or minus that are in the hopper. So we're in that mix, so that we'll get some.
we're not alone.
We're not alone, but we're in the mix, so.
Thank you.
The last thing I want to, and I'll be very brief on this.
I got some more questions. David?
Sorry, Dave.
Does engineering staff at MDC have the ability to design a local treatment plant to be located there?
Well, the question, yes, so there's a bunch of things going on right now, right? So the state of Connecticut, DEEP, and EPA, they're going through, and I've mentioned this numerous times, they're going through all kinds of exhaustive research right now with, as I refer to, the NUIAPIC and the NEBRA. NUIAPIC is a New England professional organization like AWWA, like CWWA, the NEBRA is the national one, and they're looking at exactly this issue. How do you treat PFAS? And the challenge that we're seeing, state of Maine just banned, the entire state of Maine, land application of sludge. So you've got really two ways of processing sludge. You can burn it the way we burn it, or you can use aerobic digestion, and when you use aerobic digestion...
That's not really my question.
Well, the answer is we don't own the landfill.
No, I
and
understand.
the
but
regulations...
Assuming the state does nothing.
Yeah.
I want to make the
What's
assumption.
the question, Commissioner?
The question is, the state does nothing, and like Mrs.
Yeah.
Salemi said, maybe we do something locally, don't fix that pipe,
Yeah.
do something local. Do we have the technical ability to do that, or we'd have to sub that out?
So
I
the answer is we
understand
have
there's a
to
bunch
fix
of
the
ways of
pipe.
doing it. Someone.
Yep, we
Why-
have to
why
fix
do
the
you have
pipe.
to fix the pipe?
Because the pipe, the throat of the pipe is
Yeah, but wouldn't we go the other direction to the river? We wouldn't take it to us.
Yeah,
If we had a local treatment, we'd send it to the river, wouldn't we? We wouldn't send it to us.
well,
Yeah, but
you got lots of permits to, you know, you talk.
I understand that. My question is, do we have the technical ability? We would sub
Yes,
that
we
out.
do, but the problem is we don't own the landfill. We're not the generator, so there's permitting issues, as you can imagine. If the state of Connecticut could treat it on-site And even if they wanted to, they'd have to go through a exhaustive process with EPA
I
to
understand, but they
discharge it to the
decided
river.
they don't care because we're taking care of that. So I'm looking at
Right.
assuming that they don't care, that we're going to do it. I'm just trying to
Right.
think of an alternative.
Right.
At some point, is it cheaper to do a small local plant for PFAS and ammonia going down, which isn't difficult to
Yeah.
treat?
Well-
Do it locally, get rid of it, and maybe
Right.
you walk away. I
Yeah,
don't know.
but the issue is, we don't know what the treatment of PFAS is, because we can't break it down under our normal, normal process we're using. So we don't know what that standard would be. But they did do a test for, what, a week?
3 days.
3 days with carbon filters.
Carbon filters is not,
It's a lot more
way
expensive.
more expensive. I wouldn't think it's the best way.
Yeah.
I just, again, technically, if we said as a group, we're going to build a plant there, spend some money. Could we do it, or would we sub that out?
You don't have land to build it,
We don't
so
have
we don't
permit.
own the property, and it's cheaper to treat it at the plant.
You think it's cheaper to treat it as a plant? Okay.
Well, it'd be diluted more. But anyway, further questions relative to that issue? Because I'm sure we're going to have some questions and answers that people are going to want when we get to that part of this. Okay. Are you finished?
Yes, nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And again, I'm not going to pursue anything tonight. What I was going to talk about is in the Public Works Committee, and there's going to be a meeting. The chairman is going to have a meeting on the issue that we have in there relative to other options for revenue. Okay, opportunity for general public comments.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
Judy Allen?
Yes, Judy, go ahead.
It's frustrating that, especially in the CEO report, that there's reference to an issue, and that commissioners have received information, but it's not discussed during the meeting in order to save time. It kind of leaves the public in the dark about certain things. And likewise, the agenda could include more information about significant issues expected to be discussed during reports, and that would allow the public to be aware of something of interest to them and be able to make comments at the beginning of the meeting.
Fine. I don't know what we don't discuss in public, but whether it's in a committee or whether it's in the Board of Commissioners. Further comments from the public? Commissioners' comments and questions? Dominic?
Yeah, I was
sorry,
wondering if
Commissioner
you could
Payne.
have a staff give us an update on the funds that the city of Hartford hasn't paid, whether or not we've collected them, whether or not they intend to pay, whether or not we are spending any money on outside counsel or to collect these funds or not. What's the status?
Thank you. We're not spending any money on outside counsel to collect. We, at a certain point several months ago, I reported to the board that we were making attempts to communicate with the city of Hartford, and those attempts were not successful until about 3 weeks ago, when I had discussions in a meeting with the city's corporation counsels, Attorney Rifkin. We have had discussions, I won't say daily, but probably every 3 days since then, where he's requesting information from me, I from him. And at this point, as I sit here, I'm awaiting what he considers to be a proposed agreement in draft form that he's working on, that I hope to have by the end of the week. And at that point, depending upon what that draft agreement says, I've asked for a copy of it, and it's just not ready yet. Depending upon what that says, obviously I'll report whatever it is to the board, and you can take whatever action is necessary upon my recommendation or not.
Commissioner Payne?
Just follow-up question, are they proposing not to pay everything? And if they are, then what are we going to be doing about that? And if we are not going to ask the city of Hartford to pay all the money that they owe us, are you going to give the same discount to the other 8 member towns for sweeping?
Well, I'm not giving any discount, but that'll be obviously up to the board. But if I haven't seen the agreement, so I can't comment on whether they're proposing to pay or not pay. I would assume that as part of the agreement, there's some recognition of a debt and a proposal to deal with that debt, and also a proposal going forward. But again, that's an assumption on my part. If it comes to the point where the agreement, or the draft agreement is, we're not going to pay, which is far from an agreement, but if that's what they're proposing, then we'd come back to the board. It's an issue that is, at least I consider to be one that is, and I don't, as a rule, bring collection actions to this board, but this is a potential action of members of this body, the towns, the 8-member towns suing another member town. So I think it sets an important precedent, one way or the other, and I think you should weigh in on that. Not you personally, but you as a board should weigh in on that. That being said, it's a little premature to get there. I have stressed to Attorney Rifkin, he knew about tonight, and he just wasn't able to finish up his draft, but he certainly will know about the meeting in June, and I expect something by then. If I don't get something by then maybe that's at a point where you can make some, the motions could be made and some different direction could be followed.
Chris, one question. We had started off, what, about $800,000?
Yeah, that was,
Are we now down to 385? Is that what?
We're down to the catch basin, I think it's 365.
376.
376.
376.
How much did we write off of that 800,000?
Well, we didn't write anything off. We reconciled.
No, didn't we?
Yep, we, as I said before, just quick numbers. We were talking about 800,000, 857,000. That included the 376. So we basically have, of the remainder, basically they've paid us $200,000 out of the four. So we had 400,000 due to water bills of all kinds of properties, and through reconciliation, they paid us 200 of the 400, and the other was, legitimately not due to us. So we paid about 200 grand.
And one of the other issues outstanding in the 385 is what, disposal into the landfill that they were.
We use the Manchester landfill as the repository of the grit that's removed from the catch basins. It costs us $50 a ton, Chris?
Yes,
$55 a ton, and we're, part of that 376 is the cost that we're incurring for
And
that.
at one time, we were disposing of that in the Hartford landfill, which
That's
was
correct.
owned by the
But
city,
that-
and
for
there was
nothing.
no charge.
Right.
But just to be clear, that 376 is past due.
Right,
Right? So
absolutely.
now, moving forward, September, we used to charge, that 376 is not, there's no labor in there. It's just the dumping fee for this material we've been collecting. And effective September, we started actually measuring the catch basins for the 50% rule. So now we're only charging them for every time we have to clean the 6,000 catch basins, we have to clean the 6,000 catch basins once every 2 years. And if we have to clean a catch basin because it's more than 50% full within that 2 years, that's what we're charging the town for. So they're getting a cleaning first because it's a CSO community. We're cleaning it once within 2 years. If we have to clean it twice, we're charging them. So that $55 plus labor, so it's about 170.
Yeah, it was about 154, sorry, yes, it was $50.
Yeah, it's similar to a,
We're charging them 150 some odd dollars per catch basin. So since September through December, we had to clean 300 catch basins that were in that 50% rule. That's about 60 some odd thousand bucks. So that's,
Bring this to Public Works, and maybe, if you give Public Works a resolution, and we make a decision in Public Works, and then bring it back to the board.
well, I think you didn't do.
we did that. We had a long presentation last BBW.
Let's
Yeah,
see what,
no, I'm with
if
you.
I might suggest,
That's what the
Mr.
history
Chairman
is.
and Commissioner Sweezy, let's see what,
wait until-
let's see what the proposal is, and then if it calls for board action, a referral to Public Works would be appropriate.
That would have to go back to Public Works, Ray, whatever the issue was. Further questions, comments? If not,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Curry.
Yes, sir. Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pick your brain. Before I get there, though, I would hope that any settlement that's offered to us that is less than the full settlement would come before the entire board. That being said, in regard to the landfill / deep and Colebrook Dam / the state Army Corps of Engineers, several years ago, MDC hosted a forum in the LOB on the first floor in one of their meeting rooms and presented some issues to the member towns legislators and any legislators that wanted to attend. I can't recall what the issue was, but unfortunately, my belief is that come January 23, when they go back into session again, we're still going to be dealing with these two issues because the state will not allow MDC to move forward in a legal forum to resolve the issue in any way. We believe our position is right. We believe it's legally defensible, but we can't use that because we can't get into that forum. So I'm suggesting that between now and January 23, we prepare ourselves to make a similar presentation in the LOB to our legislators and any legislators that would like to attend on why we need to resolve these two issues.
I think that, Chris, you should articulate the last meeting you did have with the,
Pre-COVID.
no,
Yeah.
not pre-COVID.
Well-
I'm talking about where we got our delegation together the last,
We've had
Last week or
we've had
2 weeks?
teleconferences. We've had teleconferences with various legislators from the what I consider to be the MDC delegation, but it's a delegation from the 8-member towns. One more recently was put together by Representative Turco from Newington, and he successfully rounded up, I want to say, 12 legislators from the area and or their staff persons. Very successful. They were all very supportive, and they wherever we are right now, we're there in part because of the work that he did and the others did to push
Right.
leadership in the House, in the General Assembly to move forward. I thought Commissioner Kerr was talking about the in-person meetings that we held where we actually went to the Capitol and had a forum that any legislator, whether they RSVP'd or not, could stop by,
Yeah, we used to do
get a
that.
sense of the issue, and we'll do that again.
but
in
with COVID,
2023.
we had a
It's been difficult,
restriction
right.
of it. You weren't even allowed in the building
Correct.
until just briefly, 3 weeks ago? And you aren't allowed on the third floor, on the Senate level. You're only allowed on the House level and the first floor. So we didn't even have access to the first floor when we would normally have this.
And it's not only the delegation, but also representatives of the 8-member towns have been very active
Right.
on this issue. And where we are or where we end up will not be because of lack of trying on their part, our part, and the part of our legislative delegation.
Further questions, comments? If not, the appropriate motion to adjourn is in order.
So move.
Without objection, we stand adjourned.